It's important that we know the difference between man law and spiritual law. Spiritual law is divine. All life forms have to abide by spiritual law. Man law is created by man to govern man. Spiritual law governs all life forms. All life forms abide by spiritual law. Spiritual law is created by the divine, the most high God. And all life forces have to abide by it. Some examples is the law of karma. What you put out, you will get. That's spiritual law. Whatever you put out, if you're putting out negativity, if you're putting out drama, if you're putting out whatever it is that you're putting out, understand that that will be your portion, right? That's just spiritual law. Another law is whatever you put forth your energy to, expect it has to yield some type of results, okay? Whatever you're giving your energy to, your focus to, it will yield results. So if you're giving your focus or energy to lack, if you're giving your energy and focus to struggle, the results of that will be more of that. Spiritual law, right? It's just the consequence. Energy has frequency, it moves, but it has laws. And man law tells you what you can and cannot do, right? Okay. For example, let's just say what's going on right now. I don't watch the news, but ICE, like there's a big thing with tearing people families apart. That is inhumane. That is not just. That is not spiritual law. That is man's law. And with man's law governs humans to act in a certain way to benefit a group of men, a group of individuals. It is not to ensure that you are being decent as a human being. It is not based off principalities. It is not based off morale. It is based off a group of men maintaining control and power over the masses. And they create these laws to ensure that the masses follow that law. I don't know, but something like that, right? But it's not divine. Following man's law isn't going to get you into heaven. Following man's law it doesn't do anything for your soul. It does not. And a lot of people misconstrue man's law and spiritual law. And people are so hyperly dependent on man's law. Well, if we don't have man's law, then there's going to be so much lawlessness in the world. That is a misconception that they want you to believe so that you can be so dependent on man's law. Because when you naturally operate in spiritual law, you will naturally just not do certain things because of the spiritual consequences of such things. There's just things that you will not do because it goes against the spiritual constructs of this world. And the crazy thing is those that created man's law know spiritual law and is operating out of it. But they don't want you to operate out of it, because if you operated outside of the law that they've created, then you will be operating in a way outside of them that they cannot control you anymore. They will have no more power over you anymore. And so that's why they use people as an examples, like, oh, if you don't follow man's law, this is what's going to happen to you. But man's law is not God's law. And once we can accept that and begin operating out of God's laws, the world will be a much better place. Because the extent that they will go to violate spiritual law to protect man's law, they have to keep it going. Back in the day during slavery times, it was a problem for Black men to be a father, to be a husband, to show up for their family. And if they did, they were used as an example because that was man's law. They were used as an example. If you show up in a certain way for your family, to protect your family, to protect your children, then you will get your hands cut off. You will get your, private parts cut off. You will even be killed. That was man's law. And we don't understand the traumatic consequences of man's law that is distilled in us from generations. Where now we're scared to operate outside of man's law. We know truth. We see things that are being done that is morally wrong, but we're so confused because it's like, what do we do? Why isn't the law doing anything? That is inhumane. When we know that it's wrong and it goes against spiritual law, but yet in man's law, there's no limits, because their whole agenda is to control the masses and to maintain power. And whatever they have to do so, they will do that. And they created these laws to ensure that it is followed through. And so It's important that we understand the difference between man's law and spiritual law and know that they are not the same. And it's important that you begin to start operating out of spiritual law. Eventually, I'll make videos about the spiritual law, but I have to prioritize this being a better human being. Maybe I'll put it in the midst. I don't know. I'm just coming up with stuff at the same time. I really don't know. I'm just going with the flow. Whatever comes up, comes up. Whatever happens, happens. I just hope y'all still tune in. That's it. That's all. All right. I love y'all. Bye.